And look who's coming up. All year long, they looked to him to light the fire, and all year long, he answered the demands until he was physically unable to start tonight with two bad legs, the bad left hamstring and the swollen right knee. And with two out, you talk about a roll of the dice. This is it. If he hits the ball on the ground, I would imagine he would be running 50% to first base. So the Dodgers trying to catch lightning right now. Sachs waiting on deck, but the game right now is at the plate. High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
All right, Ian, I went into this one kicking and screaming, but you wanted to talk about Vin Scully. Why did you think this would be a fun and compelling episode for our listeners?
Vin Scully is the most decorated broadcaster in the history of American sports, and he has at least 5 major lessons that made him a national treasure. We go into each and every one of them because I think anyone can learn from a guy like Vin Scully, who came from nothing and became so loved and so treasured and kept innovating all the way till he retired at the age of 88 years old. He was a broadcaster for 67 years, Frankie. He just passed away, and I think everyone could learn from this dude's career.
Sports fan or not, if you are into any type of thing that has longevity and career, it is your focus. This is an episode for you. Ian and I use some fun examples and talk about 5 incredible business lessons. We hope you enjoyed the show.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch. You censoring son of a bitch. I can't talk about my hat or my shirt. For those of you that are loyal listeners, you should check out the video.
Frank is wearing a Reagan Bush hat, which is fantastic. 1984 is very good. I'm very proud of him. And I am not censoring him because I'm some woke D-bag and I don't want to talk politics. I just didn't think it was terribly pertinent to what we were talking about, but there is a little pertinence to it as we get into it in a minute. But Frankie, you spend a lot of time in Southern California, more than just about anyone I know. You love Southern California. You probably spent more time there before you were a dad because it's a little hard to get kids across the country.
Correct. But
in your travels to Southern California, how many Dodgers games have you been to?
3
Dodgers games. So I went to Dodger Stadium this fall. I went to a playoff game, and that place.
That's right, you were there with Gary V.
That place is absolutely special. Dodger Stadium is massive. It is just a cathedral of a stadium. There's 4 decks behind the plate. All I could think of was how intimidating it must be to be an opposing pitcher there for the first time with that many people looking down on you. But just history all over the Dodgers, one of the oldest baseball teams around, and a huge part of their history for the majority of the Dodgers, starting when they were the Brooklyn Dodgers to when they were the LA Dodgers, was a man by the name of Vin Scully. And Vin Scully was the broadcaster for the Dodgers for better part of 67 seasons. It's the longest tenure of an announcer for any sports team in the history of sports teams. He is absolutely synonymous with the baseball club, and to the point where he's one of these guys that is a regional legend who became a national treasure. Everyone knows Vin Scully, and we're going to get into some of that. When you were out there, did you ever have a chance to just kind of listen to Vin Scully on the radio or listen to Vin do a game?
So the coolest thing about Dodger Stadium is the really cool thing that's really neat about going to the Rose Bowl, right? You got those beautiful mountains that you can see. The sun sets on them. It turns just as picturesque color.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're a sports fan, like getting a chance to go to those two venues, it's like up there with Fenway, the old Yankee Stadium,
Special
going to
place.
see a Cubs game.
Special
It's great.
place.
It's really special. But the cool thing that you kind of
might see a gang member stab someone in the parking lot after the game. That might happen. Less
Dodger
less than Raiders games, but it could happen.
But and then don't, because I'm a fat guy. Dodger dogs, big part of the experience. You got to get Dodger dog. You got to get some popcorn. You got to get some, some. You got to get some peanuts.
The kids call them glizzies now. They call them glizzies, hot dogs.
What are glizzies?
A glizzy. That's
What's
a
a
hot
glizzy?
dog. That's a hot dog. Pretty much a hot dog with like. Do you know who's got the perfect glizzy is Fenway. You know how Fenway has the buns that's pretty much a piece of bread that wraps around the hot dog?
Yeah.
That's an official glizzy. I've been taught by my son. So
beautiful.
Learn something every
beautiful.
day.
So, but what I tend to notice is this: like the most picturesque places, the best of the best always draws the best. So Vin Scully to me was someone who like literally was born almost 100 years ago, right? He was born like 1930. And it's a completely different era. And he fell in love with a sport on a radio and realized there was an art form to it. And what I love about Vin Scully is like, there's stories about him walking to the stadium in Brooklyn, and then like all the best people show up in the best spots. The best announcers work for the Lakers or the Dodgers or the Celtics or the Yankees. Like the best just type to go there, right? They just kind of follow the brands. And I've always kind of thought that was really neat. But what I think is really cool about Scully is this. It's a throwback in so many ways. It's radio. It's a dying medium. He worked there for 67 years, which is incredible. That's like the gold watch type of standard of you get a job, you just hold on to it your whole life. But the other thing that I think is awesome is this. My granddad died at 86. In the last 10 or 15 years, he basically just sat on a couch and watched the Red Sox. That was it. That's all he did. My buddy's dad is basically the same age as my granddad. And his dad is actually still alive, older than my granddad, because my granddad has passed away. And he's innovating. He power lifts. He power walks. He has like a young girlfriend. He does all these things and he innovates and he stays alive. And what I thought was really cool about Sully is he did the same thing. He innovated, like he was looked at as an innovator all the way through like his 6th decade doing this job, which most people just kind of hang on their past achievements. We talk about like the Live Golf tournament recently. Like this is similar. This is someone who did the opposite of that. This is someone who innovated without being asked and stayed relevant. And he stayed true to his core. He didn't let an ego get in his way. He did all the little things that mattered, and it made him just a treasure.
So sadly, Vin Scully just passed away. That's why we're talking about him today. He died at the age of 94 on August 2nd. So a lot of tributes going around to him. It's all over Twitter. So I've listened to a bunch of his famous broadcasts, but what's pretty wild is, especially if you're a baseball fan, some of the absolute most iconic plays in history he called. So he called Hank Aaron's home run that beat Babe Ruth's home run record. He called that play, which is maybe the greatest home run in the history of Major League Baseball. At least it's certainly the most impressive record in Major League Baseball was Babe Ruth's home run record. He called that. He called Kirk Gibson's famous home run when he limped to the plate on 2 bad knees and hit like an improbable home run. He called, you'll like this one, he called Bill Buckner's error when the Mets made that improbable. Like these are just like iconic images, and when you start, he called the catch by Dwight Clark from Joe Montana in an NFL playoff game in the back of the end zone. And as I was kind of looking at how he called so many of these, it makes you wonder, the plays are big, but do we remember the plays because of the plays, or was it because of the way Vin framed them, did he make them into these cinematic moments? And so what we want to talk about today is a little bit of what made Vin special, which is some of his storytelling. And I think one of the things that I loved, Frankie, and the first thing that I thought made Vin special. So I went back and watched the Kirk Gibson home run. There were two of them. He had two. Kirk Gibson's kind of known for two really big World Series home runs. The first one was with the Detroit Tigers, when the manager for the Padres went out and they were going to walk Gibson. They had first base open, and Goose Gossage talked Williams, the manager, out of walking him and said, "I can get this guy. Let me get him." And Gibson promptly hit a home run into the right field deck. But Vin was talking about it the whole time. Like, he gave 4. It looks like they're going to give him 4. Oh, they're going to pitch to him. So he gets into it all. But what's awesome about it, when I went back and watched it, because this is for me as a Detroit Tiger fan, this is like a moment etched in stone for me. What was fascinating, I went back and watched it. Gibson hits the home run after Scully had let everything up. Vin doesn't say a word for 90 seconds. And if you've ever just sat in front of someone and tried to be quiet for 90 seconds, but imagine seeing one of the greatest home runs in World Series history, Frank, and you got all these emotions and you in a crowd, you are in the crowd, you are in the box, and the crowd is going nuts, jumping up and down. Haven't seen a World Series winner in 30, 40 years. And they're going crazy, fans going crazy, teammates jumping, mobbing them. You've just seen history, and you can keep your mouth shut for 90 seconds, not saying, Frank, to the point where the next hitter is Lance Parrish. Lance Parrish gets to a 2-0 count before Vin Scully says, he lets the pitcher throw 2 pitches to the next batter before he says, an incredible home run by, and he gets into it a little more. But when I watched the Bill Buckner play, Buckner makes an error. He says what happens, and then he just lets the crowd talk. He just lets Buckner walk with his head down, show it. And to me, what's fascinating about all of that, and he did it on the Gibson hit, he did it on Hank Aaron's, he would just go quiet. Vin knew that people weren't tuning in for him. Vin knew who the stars were. He knew to let the moment kind of just settle and let you just sink in and watch it without filling the silence and trying to talk over it.
All good announcers are that way, just like I sat here for 3 minutes and let that thing happen. I mean, that was gorgeous. That was like listening to Ian was like watching the reporter Bob Woodward hit that home run in the natural. It was incredible.
I'm Hank Aaron. I'm the Hank Aaron of podcast, and you just sat and watched quietly.
You see what I'm dealing with around here.
I'm pretty much Hank Aaron.
What's amazing to me is Vin Scully could get it. Took him 90 seconds for the best home run at all times.
But Frankie, so you've managed salespeople forever. You manage sales teams right now. Are the best salespeople the ones that talk the most, or are they the ones that are kind of the most quiet and listen the best?
Best sales advice I ever got is when I was being trained in sales, brand spanking new. And this woman was training me. She literally looked at me and goes, "We're going to have an appointment tonight, and you're not to say a fucking word, not a word." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like scared stiff. And she goes, "God blessed you with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Shut up and listen." And then when she looked at me and said, she asked me a question, I just kind of sat there and she goes, "You can talk now." And then I opened my mouth. But that's a big lesson. It's a big lesson in just taking in the moment. The other thing is this, like, it's easy to be humble in the beginning. It's much, much harder to be humble in the end. And most people get huge, huge egos, right? Like there's a show on HBO called Winning Time. It's about the Showtime Lakers. And Chick Hearns is the announcer for the Lakers. He was there forever, right? Not as long as Vin Scully, but for I think it was roughly 50 years. It's a very, 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 very long time. And there's a thing in there where they make fun of him because he used to fist people. And he's like, don't worry, you'll get used to getting fisted. And what he's doing is he's shutting up his co-announcer because they would only give him a few seconds and he'd shut you off because he had an ego. He wanted to be the one that said it. Where Vin Scully still knew that he wasn't the star. The pitcher or the hitter was the star. And that's what's so rare, is being able to be a backseat rider, even though you are a legend.
Yeah, when I went and watched the Bill Buckner era, which was just a huge moment, here's an all-star first baseman on a Red Sox team that has not won a championship in decades and decades, that feels cursed, letting an easy little league ground ball roll through his legs. And I went back and watched it because I hadn't seen it in a while, and I kind of wanted to be wowed by I want to know what Vin said after it. And it was just kind of like, he let it go through his legs and then nothing. And it's so compelling, Frankie, because the camera keeps cutting the Red Sox on the bench, just like, can't believe what happened. You see the humanity on the face. You see the Mets team just laughing and going crazy, like they can't believe it. You see fans going crazy. And then it just slowly shows Buckner with his head down, walking off the field. And if Vin would have been talking over all that, I feel like you wouldn't have been focusing as much on the face, the expressions, the people that were really in the moment going through it.
So Vin Scully transitioned, right? He was the voice of the Dodgers, but he was the voice of the Dodgers on radio. Then he became the voice of the Dodgers on television. And he was not only the voice of the Dodgers, he was the guy. He was the guy you called in. He was like the one who just left Fox. What's his name? Joe Buck. Joe Buck has been calling the World Series for like almost 30 years, and he just left to go to ESPN to work with Aikman again. But the point of the matter is, he was the best, and he was doing the World Series, and that's what they did with Vin Scully. And we'll talk in a second about the All-Star game in '88, all these incredible things that this guy did. But we talked a little bit after John Madden died about this as well. John Madden was an NFL player, coach. Then he became an announcer. And then after he was an announcer, he became someone who pioneered video games. And he refused to let them do a 7-on-7 video game. They needed to do 11-on-11. He goes, I won't endorse it until it's 11-on-11. And he forced it. And they're like, that's going to take us 10 years. He goes, well, don't call me until it's a full football game. And they did it in 3. They made him innovate. But the point is, like, he had 4 really distinct skills. Vin Scully he adapted his game. On the radio, he couldn't be silent. He was the only person. He had to talk, but he learned how to take his game and make it from the new medium, right? Like, we've gone from a TV age to a YouTube age. The people who've adapted are the ones who dominate. And that's it, because that's where it is. What Vin did is it was different technologies, but he advanced. He pioneered radio. He got great at telling stories. When the color picture came in, he incorporated those skills into a new medium. And then he had the humility to shut up and realize, I am not the star. Gibson, whoever, Mays, whoever is the star, or the drama is that ball going through Buckner's legs. I remember where I was when the Challenger blew up. I'm a Red Sox fan. I remember where I was sitting when Buckner let that ball go between his legs. And like, I remember like looking at it with my dad and being like, oh, we're fucked. And I absolutely remember that stuff. And it's incredible that he was able to take that skill set, adapt it to a new medium.
Yeah, it makes me want to go watch some other famous moments in baseball history and see where the announcer's talking all over it, because and I love your point about being able to transition to, a different media where you have to. When he was a radio guy, Frankie, he would do it himself. They would take turns on different innings, and he didn't have a partner. But in TV, you have a partner. So I'm thinking about what you just said. I'm wondering if for that whole 90 seconds, he's doing this, like putting his hand up, like, don't talk, let the moment. Like, he just knew intuitively, we need to let the cameras do the work and let the stars be the stars. And I think so. Same with sales, 80-20, same with management. Let your team get all, once you become a manager, it's about them, not about you. Don't talk over them, give them all the praise, give them all the effort. I think it's a great lesson from Vin when you look at it. Number 2, one thing he is really known for is he told incredible personal stories throughout the game. So like, I kind of feel this way, Frank. I don't know about you. Most guys today are play-by-play guys. They tell you what's going on, but you're watching the game. You could see especially TV, you could see what's going on. I don't need you to tell me that someone snapped it and threw it to a wide receiver and got 8 yards. What makes a great announcer, and Madden was this way, is they would just tell these irreverent stories that had nothing to do with the play you just saw. They would just kind of, add color to what was already a lot of color. And Vin, he'd break in the middle, like fourth inning, he would just break in and start talking about how a player survived an attack by a wolf in his backyard. Go into like a 2-minute conversation with himself, about it. He had another one with Madison Bumgarner where he talks about how Madison found a big snake in his backyard and he hacked it up with an axe and there was a live rabbit in it, and how he is this long, the whole inning he takes up just telling stories. And for me, that's an incredible skill set of good leaders. I think ones that can tell colorful stories to get you to make you relatable, to build rapport. And the only way to do that is to be really well researched. Like Vin spent time on the field asking good open-ended questions. Where did you grow up? Where was baseball your first love? How did you, and he would tell stories about, they had nothing to do with baseball. He'd tell stories about growing up on a farm and a time the hay bales fell on someone. And because he was down there on the ground, taking a real interest in the people he was trying to cover, and he would uncover stories. I would listen to games. He would uncover stories about Detroit Tigers I didn't know, that I'd been listening to 80 games that year. He would do 3 games with them, and he'd tell you something new about one of your favorite players you'd never heard before.
What I think is fascinating about that is actually something very different. Baseball is a dynamic game. An at-bat can be 1 pitch or 20. I mean, some at-bats have gone longer than 20 pitches, right? Fouling balls off, like it could take forever. What he could do is he could weave a story into 1 pitch or 30 pitches. And he knew when that was over how to close it. Like the example Ian gave a second ago about when Kirk Gibson hit that home run and Lance Parrish is up and he finally closes the story 2 at-bats into the next guy's, 2 pitches into the next guy's at bat. Like he was a masterful storyteller, but he didn't lose sight of the big picture. And he knew that it was inside of a context, and he didn't dictate. He was simply on the horse for the ride, and he needed to fit it into the window, and he didn't have so much ego. But then this is where we talk about like residuals or things over time that really start to add up. He did this job for so many years. Like people get traded. Like just because he did a story on somebody 8 years ago, he didn't get to use it, but that person came back, he would be able to because he did the research and he had reams and reams of data, which I think is a really cool thing about being a real professional over time. And it showed.
He felt very strongly that, his job as an announcer was to be objective. So, he was always very balanced, whereas he grew up in an era where the announcer was always a real homer, was always real one-sided about the local team. And he felt like that wasn't his job, was to kind of report on what he saw and to not take sides. And the reason he believed that is he wanted to have more of a national audience than just a local niche. So what's really interesting is that's how he became kind of synonymous with the Dodgers. When he moved to California, with the new ownership in LA, they asked him if he would be more one-sided, if he would be more of a homer for the Dodgers. And he stuck to his ground. He said, no, that's not who I am. I don't believe that's the role of an announcer. And I think that's pretty cool because, you got new bosses, and they ask you to do something different, but like trusting yourself and your own skill set enough to say no to a new manager that this is the way I'm going to do it. And I think you're going to be happy with the results. Trust me. I have a lot of respect for that because I think people in their career have to have conviction in themselves to sometimes tell a manager, I don't agree with you. I think I've got a better way of doing it. Would you just give me time to show you it will work?
He was tried and true to his beliefs, and he knew what he thought was best. And like the best people to manage are never pushovers. They always it's like marriage. Like you don't want to marry somebody who's a pushover. It sucks. You get into arguments, you have to fight and you have to push back and forth, but that's how best things are forged. It's not through just do what you're told constantly. And that was him. We get into the next point we're going to get into is his innovation. And I think that's part of the innovation we kind of talked about a little bit. He was somebody who he didn't want to be the old voice. He wanted to innovate and turn something into something new. and he pioneered something there. He's created copycats, which is the flattery is the biggest form of compliment. And that's what he was able to do through his way of looking at a story and telling it. And he wasn't patronizing the audience. He was instead treating them like grown-ups the way he wanted to be treated, which I think is something that's really big that gets overlooked a lot of times. Like, you listen to college football games, and I love listening to the Gators. Our guy, Mick Hubert, just retired. That's how I listened to games in college, was over the radio with him. He was such an incredible homer, but he was a regional guy. Like, he's never going to become Vin Scully. Vin Scully could become the national voice of baseball because he spoke to a national audience, not a limited audience.
Vin retired when he was 88 years old. 88 years old, 67 years he spent doing one job or another, announcing. And we've talked about this with Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, Frankie, that you want to find careers that you can do your whole life. I mean, Warren's 93 years old and he's still investing. He's still the chairman of a Fortune 500 company. Vin was the most successful and popular announcer in the country at 88 years old. They begged him to do an 89th year. No one was pushing him out the door. If you remember, it was a big deal. Like, Jimmy Fallon was flipping cars to try to get him to come back for that one last year in like 2016 or something. So I think I have a similar story as you. My grandpa worked in a steel mill and he was a millwright. That's not work you can do much after 60. You're lugging heavy shit around. You got tools. You're getting underneath steel mill. Like, he was the same. My grandpa lived till he was 99 years old. My entire life, I knew him as retired, and retired to him meant sitting on the same chair watching TV all day, every day, and feeding the squirrels. Like, 40 years of just chilling. And now, look, my grandpa loved it. That's what he fought in the war and worked in a mill. And he was like, my retirement's going to be spent doing jack shit. And that's what he did. But I'm wired like you. I wouldn't mind at 90 still be doing some form of work. And you can do investing. You can do just about everything I do today. I could probably do when I'm 90, as long as my brain's still working. I haven't killed too much of my brain cells with rye whiskey and other stuff.
In the old days of, like, Ian, if I just slam this beer with you, we're going to black out. Those days are sadly fewer and farther between than they used to be, because kids wake up at 7 o'clock every day, no matter how much you drink.
I save more brain cells today than I used to, no doubt.
That's one of my favorite things about him, is he was an innovator and he was humble enough to not let go to his head. And Buffett is similar. There's like the people that Ian and I just absolutely adore are the older crowd, right? Like, a show that I'm into right now is the Kaminsky Method. And there's an 88-year-old guy in that show who's just crotchety and old. There's something to it, to being an innovator at that age and not just becoming stubborn. And I don't know. This is an aside, but I think it's worth saying here. So I have this kid staying in my house this week. He just turned 18. I met him at the mastermind group I help run. And he's just this really charismatic kid. I met him at 17. He just turned 18. And he was asking me like a bunch of business advice. And what I told him is, Ian, me, a handful of people, we don't have to do, we get to do. Now, I get to do real estate and I love it. I'm not a major league announcer. I'm not a football player. I'm a real estate guy and I get to do it and I love it. What Vin Scully did is he got to do something. He got really good at it. He was competitive. He was better than anybody else early. He continued to adapt, and he got to do all the way to the end, where people were saying, he was saying that's enough, and people wanted him to continue. I'll give a different example of this. For a very, very long time, Joe Paterno got to do. He got to do a ton of things at Penn State. He got to do it over and over and over. And it was basically like, I don't remember, we could look it up, but this came in my head. He was there for 40 years or thereabouts. But when that scandal broke, the Sandusky thing broke, he no longer got to do. He was told to do. He lost the right. What Vin Scully never lost the right to get to do, because he continued to be humble, prioritize what required prioritization, and he continued to innovate. And that is a gift. Like, it can go away for all of us. And he never let that happen because of his approach and his grounding. And that happens a lot of times over time with people who are super successful, and it didn't happen to him.
I think the last thing that really resonates with me about Vin Scully's career is, if you bring up Vin, he's the Dodger guy, right? Like anyone who knows sports, he is synonymous with the LA Dodgers, voice of the Dodgers for 67 years. A cool little thing, Frankie, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but at Dodger Stadium, when they before Dodger Stadium started, which is a little smaller, they played in the Coliseum, which is a massive football stadium. And
I didn't know that.
It was so cavernous that it was like some of the seats were really far away from the field, and you really couldn't see what happened or who the player was that just made the play. And so a lot of people started bringing Vin Scully. They'd bring transistor radios and they would listen to Vin on AM radio from their seats. And it got to a place where so many people brought radios to Dodgers games to listen to Vin that they would have problems up in the booth because there'd be interference with the delay of the voice. You like, even if you went to a game, it was hard to sit in any seat where you couldn't hear Vin Scully within a few, seats away or rows away, because so many people brought radios to all the games to listen. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just looked it up. I hadn't seen that. I didn't know that part of the story. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I love about Vin's career is he's known as the Dodgers guy, but he took that skill set, right? Which his skill set wasn't, I'm a Dodger, right? He didn't define himself so narrowly of, I'm a baseball guy, I'm just the Dodger guy. His skill set was reporting on what he saw, right? Letting the stars be the stars, doing great investigative reporting before the game to get to know the people he was talking about, and then telling rich, compelling stories at a really good cadence and pace. That was his skill set.
Yep.
He took that and he started doing playoff football games. He did tennis. He did PGA golf. He did college basketball. He did pro basketball. He did all of these other sports where he became, and it was never weird. It was like, oh, there's Vin Scully's voice. We love that guy. He's fantastic. I don't know if you know this. You brought up John Madden. He was Madden's partner for a while. He was Madden, but he had so many other. He had to go
Monday Night Baseball, right?
He had to do the Dodgers, and for football, he would do football with Madden for like 4 weeks, but then he would have to get back for the World Series, and Summerall would come in and do it. And it just got to a place where Summerall became kind of Madden's full-time partner because Vin would never leave the Dodgers or some of his other things. But what my takeaway there, and I think my takeaway for anyone in your career, don't define yourself narrowly, right? Like Frank could have defined himself as a publicly traded home builder vice president. That's not who he is. And then he got into real estate. He could have defined himself. That's all he is. Well, he also has a coaching business. He also leads masterminds. He's also running a podcast. He also invests in tech companies. I'm the same way. I didn't let myself get defined as an engineer. And then I didn't let myself get defined as an industrial business to business guy or a home builder or a mortgage guy, or I'm kind of just always very open-minded about where can I translate my skill sets that I've learned at each stop and then go apply it in a different industry, a different company, a different niche. And I think you just kind of build all your experiences. And if you're open to saying, yes, I'll try that, there are parallels from what you've done in the past, but you don't need to be defined by your past. You can always stay very open-minded. And I hope both you and I are still doing new things when we're 85, 86, 87, and still using the skills we've learned in the past.
I said it this way, you said it that way. It's a get to do. If you continue to innovate and you continue to have market value, you continue to get to do. You will be replaced. Like our granddads, mine was an electrician, yours was a steel worker. Their knees and their hands and their eyes gave out, and all they could do was the TV, feed the squirrels. My granddad went to the track. That was it. They didn't get to do because their functionality went away. But if you continue to innovate, your get to do has a lot longer trajectory.
Frank's granddad, was it his 90th birthday? What birthday was it?
Which one? I don't know the rest of the story.
Everyone came in from out of town, sat down at the table to have dinner, and he was like, Thanks, guys. I'm going to the track.
He just turned
Grandma
80.
started crying.
He just turned 80. Like everybody was there with him, and he just got up to go to the track. We're like, but some people got pissed, and a couple of us were like, "All right, we're going with you." That's where he wants to go.
Oh, amazing. Your
That's
granddad
awesome.
is a personal hero of mine. Thanks for coming in. I'm going to the track. And it's such a hassle to get to your granddad's house for everyone, getting to the airport, then getting over there, finding a place to stay. And he's like, thanks for coming. I'm out of here.
He gave 0.
Nope. So I will absolutely miss Vin Scully's voice. He was a treasure for me growing up, and this was a fun episode for me to do just because his career was an incredible one.
I think we've said enough about him. If you don't know him, look him up, listen to some of these clips that Ian has referenced. And again, this is where innovation and continuing to focus on what's important, and realize if you are just a jockey, that's your role, but you can be great at that role. And it can be a long run.
This is the part of the podcast where Frank normally says, check the show notes to see a few of Vin Scully's greatest hits. And then assumes that I'm going to have show notes after the fact. And
I'm adapting. Unlike Vin Scully, I'm adapting. I know that you're not doing show notes. I don't say that anymore.
So we recommend you go try Google when you're out there. So, hey, if you liked this podcast, follow us. And if you've been listening for a while, give us a 5-star review on Apple. Thanks. See you, Frankie.
See you, Ian.